and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Your host today is Steve Tugend. Steve is the Director and Chair of the Government Affairs Practice at Kegler Brown Hill Ritter. He is based out of their Columbus, Ohio office. Joining Steve is Megan Knight. Megan is the Senior Federal Government Relations Specialist at Larkin Hoffman. She's based out of Washington, D.C.
Well, I want to welcome everyone for tuning in to our podcast from SCG Legal, an international network of law firms. One of the hallmarks of SCG Legal is our depth in government relations experience. And we are so pleased to have the newest addition to our network's government affairs team, Megan Knight of the Larkin Hoffman firm. Now, of course, Larkin Hoffman is based in Minnesota. They also have a DC office, and Megan Knight is their senior government affairs person there, taking care of that law firm's clients' needs in our nation's capital. And so, Megan, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I want to just ask you, tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to the position you now have.
My pleasure. So I like to start off by saying I was bit by Potomac fever. Like a lot of people that come out to DC, I made the move in 2005 and I haven't looked back. I came here from Minnesota. I was working at the Minnesota Capitol for then Governor Tim Pawlenty during his first administration. And I was recruited to come out to Washington, D.C. to work for a Minnesota-based law firm, doing their federal government relations for healthcare issues. I've been out here ever since, and like many people, I just love it. It's the fast pace and exciting times and sometimes exhausting times, but in the long run, you get to do a lot of good work for good people. So excited to still be working for Minnesota entities at Larkin Hoffman, and looking forward to all the great things that are going to come in this new Congress and new administration.
I noticed that in general, DC-based lobbyists, they can't handle every single subject that is in the federal government. There's a vast array of them, and be an expert in every single one of them. So what subject matters do you have a particularly deep expertise in?
Yeah, it is tough, right? You've got to pick what you can really focus on. So my career has mainly focused on health and human services for public entities, whether they be large urban hospitals, large urban counties, cities throughout the upper Midwest. So I've really made that the cornerstone of my career. I've also, through those relationships, gotten to know a bit about transportation and infrastructure policies, because when you are representing counties and cities, that is a very important aspect of their federal work with their federal partners. So I would say those two areas are the focuses that I try to mainly hone in on. I've also done a number of tribal work for tribes. I've also worked for some labor entities with pensions. So it just depends. When you're a contract lobbyist, you have to get to know your clients' issues very quickly, and you rely on your relationships on Capitol Hill to help you fill in the blanks.
Obviously, we're all, talking a little bit about that first area of expertise in health and healthcare, obviously, with COVID present as it is, and our entire world really dealing with this pandemic. Healthcare is a priority at all levels of government, it seems. But President Biden, when he ran, definitely had a different perspective on what healthcare should look like after COVID compared to President Trump. And then he got an additional bonus that he now has Democratic control of the House and just barely Democratic control of the U.S. Senate. Could you talk a little bit about what you think the long-term healthcare plan is going to be for the Biden administration, and whether you think that it's going to resonate on Capitol Hill?
So the way I like to talk about this is that healthcare has been front and center for well over a decade. But pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, healthcare is going to be everyone's one of their top policy areas because it affects everybody. And whether we like it or not, it's always going to be a part of our dialogue here in Washington, D.C. So I would say that with President Biden, January 6th, there was a lot of joy that morning when everyone woke up. I'm sure on his team when he realized that he was able to squeak out a very slim Senate majority, and then obviously followed up by the insurrection. So it's like we started off, this has been a wild month. But if you look at what President Biden ran on and shoring up the ACA and making sure that he solidifies that as the choice of healthcare reform for America, he's sitting pretty good right now. He's going to be able to utilize the Senate majority to pass this COVID relief plan, which was really going to be difficult if he didn't have that opportunity to use reconciliation. And then he's going to be able to pivot and focus on his top priorities, which is first and foremost, protecting the ACA. And if you look at his cabinet positions and who he's appointed to the HHS cabinet, I mean, you've got people that have worked with him for a long time that are going to know how to sell his priorities to not only to the American people, but to his friends on Capitol Hill. So I think in just the long run, President Biden in those first 100 days or even first 2 years of his administration, which are going to be so important, he's going to be able to accomplish quite a bit, things that he didn't expect to before the Georgia runoff.
If you had to guess, what is the lowest hanging fruit in the area of healthcare on stabilizing the ACA or expanding coverage? I mean, he talks about a public option so that we would actually have something kind of sort of like Medicare to offer to certain populations. Maybe what do you think the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of expanding the federal role in delivering healthcare to the U.S.?
So I think the public option is going to be a long shot. He's come out and said that himself. I don't necessarily look at it as lowest hanging fruit when it comes to healthcare, because even on a good day, if you look at CMS, even on a good day with no crises, no pandemics, nothing, no problems, it's still tough, right? We in the healthcare community, healthcare lobbyist community, have been dealing with, especially if you work for any kind of Medicaid participant, we've been looking at defense for the last 4 years. So right now, it's like everyone can kind of take a collective deep breath and say, okay, we no longer have to be on this like high alert defense. We can actually look forward and be more, proactive as opposed to reactive. And I think that's where you're going to see some policy changes. And they're going to I think they're going to come through executive orders. We've already seen dozens of them that he signed to help the pandemic. But I think you're going to see very small regulatory tweaks that are going to help really wonky policy, deep industry people that are going to say, okay, if we change something like the IMD regulation for inpatient mental health institutions, you're going to be able to increase your amount of patients in your beds, and you're going to save money. I mean, it's going to be really wonky stuff like that you and I aren't going to need to talk about on a podcast because it's not very exciting. But for people in the industry, it's going to make big changes, and they're going to see returns on their very small margins. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking at. But again, not that exciting, like low hanging fruit, like when you talk about a transportation reauthorization or, stimulus packages. I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of that in the healthcare field.
So let's talk a little bit about infrastructure and transportation. It happens to be a favorite subject of mine as well. We have a transportation reauthorization bill that it expired last year, and they kick the can down the road for a year. What do you think the chances of getting a surface transportation reauthorization bill enacted this year are?
I think they're high. I believe it was late last week or early this week. They're all kind of blending together now. But I know that President Biden was already talking about with his friends on Capitol Hill, making sure that we set up everything we can to get a transportation bill reauthorized. I mean, experts will say, and we've all heard it before, but transportation is a bipartisan issue. Both sides of the aisle want to see something done. They want to see their roads and their roads and their bridges and infrastructure in their districts improved. And this is something that is long overdue. You have now with the Senate flip, and particularly, you have chairmen and chairwomen on both sides of the aisle that want to get this work done. And I think that it's going to be one of those policy areas where everybody can come out happy if they reach the common goal. That's what we were promised, a number of years ago, is that we're going to immediately get a transportation bill passed, and people have been impatiently waiting now for it. So it's long overdue.
I remember that it was a running joke in DC that every week was infrastructure week, and yet nothing got done.
Yes, every week was infrastructure week, and then it wasn't. It was the least infrastructure time that we've all experienced for quite some time. So I think that, and it's not only just the FAST Act reauthorization, but I think there's going to be some other opportunities in the transportation world. It's going to be, I think there's going to be a possibility of some more stimulus money. I mean, I am looking at President Biden, and we're in this really unique situation, right? We can look at a blueprint of what he did working with President Obama, and such similar economic and kind of crisis situation that he went into then with President Obama. You can see that he's getting the band back together and figuring out how can we all work with this together. One of those ways, he was the architect behind the stimulus packages back then in 2008. And that was really focusing on transportation infrastructure and shovel-ready projects and how can we get the economy moving again. So I think that we're going to see some of that come to the surface. I guess you could use a pun there, right, with surface transportation.
Well, it's interesting you point that out, because my impression actually is that Biden is more pro-infrastructure than Obama was. I remember that the stimulus package under then President Obama having a lot of other component parts, and I frankly was a little underwhelmed by the size of the infrastructure investment. And I think that there's a unique opportunity with the expiration of the reauthorization bill that automatically will generate trillions of needs for spending. So you can really direct things in a way, and the timing is perfect because you have a need to recover the economy. You need to start getting people back to work and getting the building trades going, and something that, in my view, that the last stimulus package under Obama left out, which was all the folks that do the design work, all the folks that do the engineering. When everything had to be shovel ready, you cut out those trades, the trades of engineering and architects. And so my sense is that actually we'll see even more emphasis than even Obama, because Biden's kind of a lunch bucket Democrat. That's what he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm having a lot of clients in local governments and regional governments in transportation. It's an exciting time to be looking at the possibility of legislation in this area. I would sense that, having taken Amtrak every day almost of his Senate career, that there's a lot of excitement about Amtrak. Have you been following that at all? We certainly had some news stories pop in Ohio regarding Amtrak exploring additional routes. And there has been a lot of media coverage about that. I don't know if you've been following that or not.
Just peripherally, I don't have any client interest in that right now, but certainly over the years in Minnesota, there has been a lot of talk about high-speed rail, and the late great Jim Oberstar was also a big fan of rail improvements, and there's always been discussion of a high-speed rail between St. Louis County and Chicago, and Cook County and Chicago, Illinois, and looking at routes. So just like I said, peripherally, but an absolutely exciting time for the transportation sector right now. And I think that you made a really good point. We can learn from what didn't help industry leaders from the 2008 stimulus package, and kind of change and tweak that, right? That's part of the magic of the timing right now, is that Biden can look back and say, or his experts, right, that he has on staff with him can look back and say, well, this worked really well. And, we know Shovel Ready got things moving really quickly, but it X'd up this policy group or this expertise, just like you pointed out. And I think they can build on that and actually create more opportunities and bring people across the aisle, because that's really what it's going to be. The biggest thing to take away, I think, from this year, and particularly these 100 days, is going to be, how do we see the negotiation skills of the Biden administration in bringing members across the aisle? How can they break that logjam? How are they going to do it? And if you think about it, that might be what the low-hanging fruit is what are these bipartisan issues that you have, the magic number of senators to come on to? And I think transportation is one of them. I mean, we could talk about earmarks a little bit. There's been some chatter this week about that.
A lot of chatter.
Majority Leader Hoyer brought that up this week, which is exciting for the government relations industry. The idea of earmarks coming back to Washington, D.C., I know makes my heart beat a little faster. And just getting those opportunities for clients to have those discussions again with members is quite exciting.
I, of course, prefer to call them congressionally directed spending, but
yes, of course. Or now A1 projects, I think, is the popular term. The Article 1 of the Constitution. Right. So A1 projects is another new name I've heard floated around. So
Congress,
you say those things, and then everyone says, "Wait, do you mean earmarks?" So
for those that are watching that do not know, under the Constitution in Article 1, Congress. Not the executive branch, but Congress has the power of the purse. Mm-hmm. And there has been some criticism of, particularly on the Hill, that Congress has abdicated its constitutional role in not directing spending. So, but when earmarks were abolished, I think about 10 years ago, it was just as I was joining Kegler Brown Hill and Ritter that they went away.
Yep. Yeah, and it's really changed the way business has been done out here for regular order. And if you think about, when did things start changing, and when did we stop seeing appropriation bills being passed and regular order being the day-to-day processes here? It was when the earmarks were taken away. So the thought of bringing those back, and the thing is that's so interesting is that when the moratorium was put in place, there were already a number of changes that had gone into place for earmarks to make sure that there weren't any of the funny business that had been going on in previous administrations and previous years. So they were all for nonprofit entities, and all the members had to put their names on them, and there was no secret earmarks or bridges to nowhere or anything like that. And so I really hope that both the House and the Senate can figure out how to bring those back into the process, because it doesn't change the budget. It doesn't change anything monetarily in the budget process. It just gives opportunity for members to congressionally appropriate projects that are important to their districts. And, I, for one, would love to see them come back. I'm sure a lot of our colleagues out there would as well.
And, in Columbus, where I am in Columbus, Ohio, our region all stood together and had a process where we would identify all possible projects that were worthy of earmarks. And this was our business community, our nonprofit community, our county government, our city government, the Ohio State University, our airports, all came together and put together a common list of community projects that we thought merited congressionally directed spending. Yep. And then we would evaluate them and rank them according to the different various appropriation bills. And then we would also rank them overall, what our priorities were as a community. There's nothing secret about that. There's no bridge to nowhere that can possibly find its way into that kind of a community list. But yet that's the community speaking with one voice, which of course congressional members love, that they don't have to choose among their children, that they actually have a list of priorities on one sheet of paper. And it worked pretty well. What bothers me is we didn't really get it right until about the last year we did it. And then it went away. So,
and then your guy, Speaker Boehner was the one that made that all happen. So
yes,
he famously never offered an appropriation and never was a part of that scramble. So without having, skin in the game.
That's the story and he's sticking to it, Megan.
Yes, of course. He always has some great stories, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, but no, Ohio's got a great delegation, and that's really mindful of you and your industry to get together and do that. I am right now telling clients, let's get ready, let's get our ducks in a row, because it's going to be an absolute feeding frenzy if they do pull the trigger on this, because they're going to have to do it really quickly in order, if they want to get it into this next appropriation process. Everything is truncated right now based on what's going on with COVID. And if you want to be a player and really formidable to get an appropriation through the process, we're going to have to have everything ready for the member to just click go on it. And that's going to be challenging because a number of things, right? You've got a whole crop of staff that have never done this before. And appropriations is a tricky process. It's really overwhelming for staff. I remember talking with them when I first came out here, and they were just like, this is incredible. We have thousands of projects for our one district, and we don't know how to pick and choose. And we only get a couple in the one account, and, HRSA or whatever the account might be. So I think in order to be a good lobbyist and to do our responsibilities, not only for our clients, but for the members of Congress, you're going to have to act really quickly and make sure you have it just a pretty little package ready for them to trust it and to go with it. So it's going to take a lot of work on client side and obviously lobbyist side to get that ready.
Well, getting into the weeds a little bit here about that, traditionally we're coming upon the deadlines on the Hill for appropriations requests. I mean, they'll be right around the corner.
Yep.
Do you sense that earmark requests need to pretty well, just for a safe harbor, need to follow that same timeline? What is your sense on that?
I do. I think so. I just had a conversation yesterday with some staff, and they said, their forms aren't up on their websites yet, but they will be soon. They are ready if the House decides to move forward with this, but cautiously ready because they don't know the parameters yet of what kind of projects can go forward, how much they'll change from the moratorium. Previously when it was, nonprofit entities and had to have a regional approach and all the various components that the pre-moratorium appropriations required. So, I think maybe they can push it to April if they have to, but really it's a March deadline typically for the appropriations, just to get into the offices and for them to make their decisions of what they're going to push and press forward with the committees.
So, in Ohio, by last count, we had 3 members of our delegation there are on the appropriations committee, that being, of course, Captor, Ryan, and David Joyce. How is the delegation for Minnesota faring?
So we only have one. We have Congresswoman Betty McCollum. She's a cardinal. She's a chair, and she's an excellent appropriator. She comes from the school of David Obey, and long-time old school appropriators. She does an excellent job for her district and for the state of Minnesota, and particularly for tribes in Minnesota and throughout the upper Midwest. Really thoughtful on that. But that's it. We do only have one member, no one in the Senate. Although, Amy Klobuchar and Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Tina Smith work tirelessly for Minnesota. And I would say that if appropriations came back in the Senate as well, they would work really hard to make sure that we were lined up with some great projects. So
what are the odds that they end up being in the Senate as well? It's difficult to hold back and to allow the House to only have earmarks and the Senate not to. It would strike me.
Yeah, it will be a challenge. I mean, you haven't heard as much discussion about it on the Senate side, although I have heard, from sources that senators are talking about it more often. Particularly Senator Amy Klobuchar has brought it up in some discussions of recent. So it's an opportunity. Everything starts in the House. So if you can get some projects in those House appropriation bills, they go to the Senate and they pass through committee, we could still see them. You might not see the larger, state projects. You might just see the smaller district projects if the Senate isn't going to play ball. But I think it's a great place to start,
Well, kind of getting out of subject matter expertise and just talking about how you approach lobbying, how we approach lobbying. What's your general philosophy on approaching lobbying? When you're talking to a client, it's really important, I think, that you track, that you have a consistent style, that you have consistent values. What is your lobbying style, would you say? How do you go about your work?
What a reflective question. Well, obviously our word is everything. So honesty is the number one thing. I want to make sure my clients can trust me. They know that I'm not going to tell them things just to keep the contract, right? You got to make sure you set expectations appropriately. You never want to tell a client they can get something and promise them that, and knowing that it's going to be a heavy lift. So keeping expectations at a moderate level to make sure that when you do get your wins, they're appreciated, even if they're small and incremental, I think is really important for lobbyists, especially new ones just coming out and figuring out how do I do all this, right? How do I make people feel like we're doing things for them when it's so hard to measure what those wins are? I think one of my things that I've always held really closely to me is that I never want a member or staff to come out of a meeting with my clients or with me and be like, oh, that was a surprise. We didn't see that coming. So I'm really open, and I prepare to the 10th degree to get everything I need to staff before meetings happen. They know every question, they know every talking point. The advance that I do on the front end is almost harder than any of the work you do inside the room. And sometimes clients are a little bit surprised by that. They look at it as this is a show and tell. This is when I'm giving my presentation. I don't want them to know everything ahead of time. It's no, we want them to know everything. We want them to see these slides before we show them. We want them to know about this letter. Any request we have, talking points, all of it should be very wide open. Everybody knows about it. And this is just, we are going through the motions in this meeting to guarantee the support of the member. It's not to surprise them with the support. So that's one of the philosophies that I try to do. I also, I don't talk to staff just for the sake of talking to them. Their time is just as important as a member's. And there's a lot of lobbyists that will use the opportunity to do pre-meetings with staff as billable time for clients that really it's not necessary. And so I've never tried to do that, and I've kept my relationship strong with staff because of that.
Your point about preparation is a very good one, and certainly consistent with those occasions where I will bring clients to DC for meetings on the Hill. You don't know what your environmental conditions are going to be. Exactly. When a meeting on the Hill actually occurs. You could absolutely have it wrapped up that you're going to be with the member as opposed to staff, and you get staff. You yes. absolutely think that you're going to be in the member's office, and then all of a sudden things change and you're out in the hallway. And so that's just the way it happens. It happens to every single lobbyist.
Yep.
And the way and what's key to prevent any decrease in effectiveness during that meeting, I think, is preparation. You're absolutely right. That's well said.
Yeah, it's really important. And, when you brought that up about not being in a member's office, I think about the times where you've got this tight schedule and then all of a sudden you get the call of like, oh, you're going to meet with Senator Klobuchar over at the Capitol. And you're like, okay, that's a great opportunity, right? You're going to be inside the Capitol with Senator Klobuchar. She's going to show you the speaker, she's going to walk around the Senate and show you all the cool things, but I have to be back over in Rayburn in 22 minutes. And so it's really good to have those relationships, especially with schedulers, to be able to quickly shoot them a text while you're en route and say, like, we're delayed, what can we do? And to keep your cool and your poise, to still be the shepherd for your clients for that day, but also managing everything behind the scenes so that they don't have to worry about any of that, right? Because when you've got CEOs of hospitals or county commissioners or mayors of cities, the last thing they need to be worrying about is the logistics of the day. That's why they have us, right? So I work on that. Now, I will say I am nervous about post-insurrection and what it's going to look like for lobbyists and for our community. I have been to the Capitol complex since. I saw the giant walls of the fencing and the military presence, and it was off-putting and scary, kind of, right? Well, let's be honest about it all. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, how are we going to navigate this and still get into the offices and have those opportunities for our clients when we get back to normal, right? I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know when that's going to happen. But instinctually, I was just thinking, like, how am I going to go see Senator Klobuchar at the Capitol? How is that going to happen anymore with my clients? It was already very challenging. You had a staff escort. You couldn't have any food or water in your bags. You couldn't, there was just a lot of hurdles to go through, the security hurdles. And now I just can't imagine what they're going to be like. I think we're going to see a big change in how we have our meetings and what they look like moving forward.
Well, I have not been to the Hill since the insurrection and probably won't be there until much later this year, probably after the summer, I would guess. Yeah. The first time I'll be there. Once most of us have shots in our arms, I would suspect then things will open up and we'll all be more comfortable. Certainly my clients are not comfortable with doing that right now. Right. Any other subject matters that you think that Congress is likely to take up here in the next 6 months? Are there any possible surprises other than COVID and infrastructure?
It sounds like higher education is going to have a large lens on it. We've heard quite a bit, even just this week, about the forgiveness of student loans. And, the president in his town hall discussing that he would be willing to look at a $10,000 amount for forgiveness as opposed to $50,000 amount. So either way, if it's 50,000 or 10,000, we're going to have to look and figure out how to manage with the increases in cost for higher education and who is going to pay for those. And, states' budgets can't carry it. And, where are we borrowing from to make sure that we pay for that? So I think higher education, there's going to be a large lens on that. I think there will be significant discussion on broadband, and that'll get really moved into the transportation infrastructure reauthorization discussion. But I think you're going to look at it more of an equity issue, both in a rural and an urban environment, particularly with students doing at-home schools and everyone working from home, and just the expectations that we all have for fast-speed internet. And some people just don't have that, and it's it's a commodity that everyone deserves. And so I think you're going to see a lot of discussion about that in both, the Agriculture Committee and the Transportation Committee.
In the Ohio State House, it is the issue that unites every single member of our legislature. Broadband is the uniting issue. They all agree that it needs to be addressed. And what is fascinating is while you have certain representatives and senators at the state level who represent low-income areas, there is respect from the members that represent higher income areas that affordability needs to be a component of that discussion. And they just get that it is becoming the next electrification of this country will be brought. Yeah. And so we're seeing a lot of emphasis at the state level. Ohio is looking at a model where they actually work with the providers, and they allow the providers to submit plans to go that extra mile. And they say, look, I would go to this area, but I can't because it's this much unaffordable. I need this increment of financing or capital in order to justify making that capital expense. Can you help with that increment? We'll pay for this much. Can you pay for this much? Right. And so that is a program we're actually looking at the state level, which probably will pass.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I know in Minnesota equally, it's a it's a issue where both sides of the aisle agree on it. Our Minnesota delegation is very involved in it. Senator Tina Smith sits on a leadership committee regarding rural broadband and how important that is for Minnesota. And she does a lot of great work with Senator Baldwin and Senator Hoeven and her friends across the aisle on that. So I will see that. I would see that that's going to be an opportunity as well. But I know, you talk about what's it like out in DC, and I know my clients always ask me that, and what is everybody's feeling? And I feel hopeful. I feel hopeful for this new Congress. I feel hopeful for the new administration. I felt these last 4 years were really tough for our industry, dealing with the day-to-day chaos of it all and trying to reassure clients that things were still happening on Congressional Hill. But I think everybody, similar into the healthcare field, we can kind of take a deep breath. We can be more proactive in the things that we need to accomplish for our clients, and hopefully get some really good work done.
I am equally hopeful.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a very good time to be a lobbyist in Washington, because I think there's so much more that's going to get done, and there is a lot of pent-up demand on the policy and activity level to get some things done and to move government forward and get back into the business of governing.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share?
I mean, that covers it. I really appreciate this time to chat with your network, and I know, please welcome me to join other things, and Larkin Hoffman is always interested in joining these kind of things. So thanks for the time.
Well, Megan, we really appreciate you joining us for this discussion. We also appreciate you joining the network, and it's very obvious why your firm has retained your services and brought you on board, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks so much.
And that concludes our recording. Thank you for joining us today. You can find this and many other episodes at scgglobalspin.com.